Hey guys, welcome back to the Casual NBA Fanatic podcast. Now, after ranking my top 5 players over 35, which I released out in one of my Instagram reels over the past week, I just wanted to extend the list to the top 10 guys who are peaking with their longevity in the NBA right now over this 35 threshold. And especially with how considering the ease at which these guys can actually dominate late into their careers, just with how the game has evolved around more skill orientation and cognitive orientation rather than just athleticism and physicality, but also just how these specific players have also been able to mold their play styles, mold their skill sets to fit in with the modern NBA. So obviously for this list as well, I'm going to be considering guys who are also 35 years old. So it's not just over 35 as in 36 and above. Guys that are 35, they are technically older than 35 years old, so they'll be added onto this list. Otherwise, this list would be pretty dim with pretty poor talent. But to start this list, from number 10, I have Nikola Vucevic, who has started off who did start off the year pretty well. He was an absolute heater for just like the Bulls were as well, but he has come back down to earth relatively with the shot making value that he was bringing, which was instrumental in that Bulls high-paced, spaced half-court offense, especially at the start of the year. And in terms of that two-man game as well between Vooch and Giddey, that was exceptionally valuable for them. He's averaging 17 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists to start the year on 56% effective field goal percentage, 38% on threes on about 5 attempts a game. So basically with Vucevic, he's the offensive ceiling raiser on a relatively cheap contract in the NBA right now. He provides tons of value as that gravitational big, but what the drawbacks do come with is that he does struggle tremendously as a post scorer as of this season especially. On post-ups, he's taking 2.5 possessions a game. He's only scoring the ball at 0.72 points per possession. That comes to the 7th percentile. And obviously, probably, I think the worst amongst all high volume post-up bigs in the league. And so the game has been really limited besides what the Bulls have been able to do, milking that perimeter scoring value that he brings. But also even that has also begun to regress as we go into this season even more. But what Vooch does bring is strong physicality and, somewhat developed shot touch on those tough looks in the post. He still still makes 57% of those hook shots. But overall, though, he does struggle to generate real half-court shot creation for himself, despite being more of that offensively juiced big man. The athleticism, obviously, is pretty limited. And he's also just listed at 6'9", and the lack of over-the-top, the actual over-the-top disadvantages against those real lengthy rim protectors, that makes it hard for Vooch to overcome, their contests with just strength and physicality as your main advantages when there isn't height to combat that as well. And he's been more of that lower tier roll man finisher as well. He's just finishing 59% of his looks at the rim, and he doesn't really get there very often either. So obviously there are a few drawbacks with his game right now. And then obviously defensively as well, this is probably the biggest drawback is we know this guy already loses a lot of ground here, and it does really stem from just that lack of athleticism, just the lack of foot speed, lack of lateral capabilities. In the high drop, the defense is kind of fine in terms of his discipline and his timing. But in terms of the lack of length, the lack of agile foot speed, just make those recovery situations just a lot slower. That kind of just jeopardizes the Bulls' defensive structure a ton, especially if they are playing a team that has strong passing on the perimeter. But to be clear though, Vucevic does rank here on this list just because of the luxury that he brings with his gravity, and it's still super unique and super valuable to any offense. It does obviously come from more of a skill perspective, and obviously his lack of movement value off ball does deprive him of that elite perimeter shot making value from impacting offense at a high level at this point in his career. But he does rank here at number 10 amongst these old guys, with just what he can do as a specialized offensive big man with a rarely polished skill set in the NBA. Now, number 9. At 36 years old, we have DeMar DeRozan. So obviously with DeMar, like what we just said with Vucevic, we're talking about a guy with a specialized skill set, someone who does naturally lack many other requisite traits needed to still be a star in this league. But he is still one of those, he's still in that scorer archetype type of mold. But nevertheless, though, at age 36, DeMar is still one of the most prolific intermediate scorers in the NBA, who actually provides decent half-court scoring value with his still really conditioned shot touch anywhere within the arc. So to start off the year, for Sacramento, DeMar's averaging 18 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists on 53% effective field goal percentage. So those come to 50, 38, 91 splits. And so with his shot value in the half court, like we're seeing it already to start the year with Sacramento. Obviously, it's on a lower volume compared to what we are used to with DeMar. But he's shooting 68% at the rim, 57% in the paint non-restricted area, and 44% in the mid-range. All pretty high-level marks for a wing, let alone being 36 years old. Where DeMar does kind of lose ground is like when it comes to like affecting purely team-based offense. And obviously, since he is so limited as an offensive 1A, especially with Sabonis out and Levine looking pretty disengaged game to game, those initiation possessions are pretty capped just with the lack of direct rim pressure value. As you know, DeMar just simply, he doesn't have the same powerful momentum generating athleticism that he used to have. And that does take an even deeper bite into his value, especially making simple passing reads that he once could make. But now, obviously, without these real athletic and physical traits, it does seem like DeMar is pretty capped at this point in his career, especially as a guy who still ultimately lives on the toughest and lowest percentage shots in the game, with minimal rim attempts and minimal perimeter attempts relative to his positional standards. Obviously, though, with DeMar, though, you still got to value what he does bring in spurts. He's a guy that can still rise for 25 a night, and he can have these super reliable efficiency-based nights as a scorer. And with DeMar, what is special about him still, and what's been special about his entire career, is that he doesn't really need too much of an initial advantage to create his buckets. You don't need to run intentional off-ball action to get him open. And that is a testament to the skill that DeMar still brings to this day. And so for that, I still have him as the 9th best old player in the NBA today. Now, number 8, we're moving on to winning impact, like one of the biggest winning impact guys in going around the NBA, and that is Jrue Holiday. Now, for me, Jrue has been exceptional in the 12 games that he has appeared in so far this year. He's averaged 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 8 assists on 54% effective field goal percentage, and still looking like a high-level point of attack defender with just the extremely switchable instincts that he still brings. And like we know he's always had those, just with the everlasting strong base and that powerful core that he still can use to deny and harass bigs and those rim pressuring forwards. But with Jrue though, it's about his portability and like what we've seen from there that gives him this value as still a star in my opinion in this league. And this season, I mean, when he's played for Portland, he's been their second best player, obviously behind Denny Avdia, but also just from the previous years as well, like when we saw him in Boston in that super backseated role, just focusing more on those pure connective traits. Like he's proven that he can thrive in any setting in the modern NBA and contribute to winning basketball at the highest level in a starting role, regardless of what option he's going to be. And he's bringing that same energy as well to Portland as the championship success in terms of just that focus on winning basketball with his ability to actually table set the offense better than anyone that they have from their youth, and you know, better than anyone from that more athletic prioritizing talent that they do have. And like Jrue's just his mindset and his approach, like it's already been instrumental for Portland, and just the way that he can also still command games and just provide timely scoring and basic initiation value. That is why he's still a top 100 player in this league, 100% sure about that as well. And I've got him 8th in the NBA out of this range of old guys, and he's still playing some really, really high-level basketball at age 35, and he's been absolutely vital for Portland. And his actual value to specifically Portland makes him one of the most valuable role players going around the NBA. Now, moving on to number 7, we're going to hit off with Draymond Green. Now, Draymond's stats don't really look overly appealing. Like, we know the production numbers are never going to be that stellar. And so for that aspect, like, you know, he's been all right. 8 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. But the scoring value, though, does keep dropping. He's only shooting 48% effective field goal percentage, 38, 33, 62 splits. And he's averaging the most turnovers he's ever averaged since 2016 and the most fouls he's ever averaged in his entire career. Thing is, though, Draymond's impact is the thing that continues to be the major draw for what he still brings value-wise in the NBA, and that's how I like to grade players. According to Clean the Glass, Draymond Green is nearly a negative 14 for Golden State's defense, which obviously is inverse when we're talking about defense, And that means that per 100 possessions, the Warriors are holding teams 14 points lower with Draymond on the floor. And that ranks him in the 97th percentile, as he still remains probably still a top 3 defender on the planet, with just how he still continues to bring the best defensive instincts in the world, the best timing, the best reaction speed. And he's someone that can slot into any lineup variation and still anchor what is a top tier defense with his presence on the floor. And really with Draymond, it is simple. Obviously, like the array of different ways Draymond can still find ways to blow up offenses is just so impeccable at this age. And it's just hard to overlook what he can still do as this timeless defensive monster who has never relied on athletic traits as much compared to what he does interpreting and anticipating teams' offensive sets. And his communication and just the proactive thinking and how that makes up for his teammates' mistakes, especially the younger guys who can struggle with closeout timing, rotation decisions when playing in chaos. That is mightily valuable for what Golden State can do as far as their floor. And with also just how the Warriors love to prioritize turning teams over, playing with the extreme doubles, just streaking the floor so aggressively, depending on their foot speed to recover. Just Draymond's ability to literally captain vocally is one of the greatest assets any team can have on that side of the ball. And then also when you're factoring in the cognitive strengths as that timely decision maker, timely bullet passer, there really don't come many more valuable guys in that facilitation archetype that Draymond still brings. And that's why he still fits the Golden State system so perfectly at age 35. And so with that, for me, he still lands here at number 7 on this list, close to so many guys who we do also consider perennial all-stars. And that's because Draymond still brings legit value in this league. Now, moving up to number 6, we're hitting off with Damian Lillard. Now, obviously, Damian Lillard, obviously with him being out, makes it pretty hard to rank him. But, with him still, as of last year, still being one of the premier pull-up jump shooters in basketball, I'm going to give Dame his respect on this list. After last year, he still was able to average 25 points, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists on still a very respectable 55% effective field goal percentage for his role. Now, I want to be quick with Dame here. The thing with him is just the aggregate efficiency. That's why I do value what he brings to an offense. He still took around 9 threes a game last year, and he made 41.5% of his threes off the catch as well. And so basically just skill-wise, Dame as of last year was just still this fully developed guy who brought such a positive value of his overall impact. And that does what he naturally brings to an offense just with the floor that he gives you as still a high-level elite efficiency pick-and-roll scorer in the aggregate field is what does give him a ton of credibility even at age 35 to actually still rely on all of your creation from the perimeter on him. I think last year he was a 93rd percentile pick-and-roll scorer, and I think he and SGA were the best high-volume pick-and-roll players last year. Obviously with Dame though, it is hard to rank him, but here at number 6, I just think with the luxury of that skill set matched with just the physical feel and just obviously just the playoff resilience that he still brings and what we've seen in all the playoff runs that he's been in recently in the past few years, that's why I still view him as a star until proven otherwise. And I think for Portland, he's going to be exceptionally valuable for them with just the skill that he's going to bring on the perimeter and just the actual pace control that he's going to bring. Similar to what Drew brings, but he's going to bring way more range, way more off-ball value as well. And that's going to be terrific for them. Now, number 5 though, obviously this hits into who I listed on my reel, but number 5, I did have James Harden, and it's going to stay that way. So now here's obviously where it gets interesting. So James Harden, he lands here at 5 after what has been a terrific start to the season individually for him. He's averaging 27.6 rebounds and 8 assists on 54% effective field goal percentage as he's trying his very, very best to try and attempt to keep the Clippers boat afloat after what has been a pretty terrible start to the year. Now with James though, the thing is though, he doesn't impact team offense at a great level by any means at this point in his career compared to the top offensive engines in the NBA, but he still for sure brings, what we spoke about with Dame, just a luxurious skill set that you have to value in the modern NBA. He's the most prolific isolation scorer in basketball right now, still at age 36. He's taking over 9 isolation possessions a game That's nearly 3 more on average than Luka Doncic and what he brings, who is actually second in volume in the NBA. And he's also doing this while still running about 7 pick and roll possessions each game too as the ball handler. And in terms of shot quality, just Harden's still relatively reliable touch at the rim, and like what he can bring on those runners, on those floaters, just mixed with that pull-up shooting threat that he still gives, like that just gives him a ton of value as that initial advantage creation option in the NBA still today. My only thing with Harden though is just obviously like you're losing a ton of value on the defensive side of the ball, and like that kind of just stems from the lack of athleticism. But for LA and like what the Clippers roster and what their awful situation looks like, just obviously with the loss of Derek Jones Jr., that injury, obviously Beal's out for the year as well. That takes out a lot of potential athleticism, but also just on the roster as well, like just with the changes they made in the offseason, that continued deterioration of athleticism on the roster. That is where like we've actually seen James just be thrusted into point of attack defensive roles that he has no business being involved in. And as far as like still providing that base floor for an offense as that surgical half-court creator, that's what I'm going to base his primary value off. And so Harden still certainly has real impact in this league, and his slow-paced preference for tempo has enabled him to still thrive in this league despite being age 36 with a 30% usage rate still in this league. Now moving on to number 4. Now I'm going to hit off the last few guys pretty fast because you can kind of like go through my little explanation that I gave off in that reel anyways. And like the list is going to stay the same from here on out, but I'll just give a quick explanation as to why they are where they are. But number 4, I had Jimmy Butler. He's averaging 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists on 52, 44, 86 splits. And that rounded to 56% effective field goal percentage. And he's only playing just 31 minutes a game. But we're talking about a guy who is hyper versatile on both ends of the floor. And like when we are talking about aggregate value to a team, like your ability to mix and match into different situations, there aren't many better stars in the NBA than Jimmy Butler at doing that. So just like to emphasize that, offensively, in isolation possessions, this guy is still an 80th percentile scorer, 1.22 points per possession. Out of pick and rolls as the ball handler, he's still in the 80th percentile at 1.05 points per possession. On post-ups, he's in the 83rd percentile at 1.24 points per possession. And then in terms of like the actual off-ball stuff and what he brings as an athlete, he's still one of the highest volume non-big cutters that we have in the NBA. And just in transition, he's an 85th percentile scorer as well. So basically, there's nothing that this guy doesn't bring in terms of like the actual range at which he can score the ball and contribute to an offense as like one of the premier connective guys in the NBA. And then obviously like defensively as well, you talk about an absolute supermind as well. Just a guy with a jacked superior frame to be able to play these backline roles, you know, as one of the premier weak side rotators that we have in the NBA from the cognitive and athletic value that he brings. His ability to deny cross matches, his ability to swarm and recover for Golden State's, like, you know, because they love to aggressively shrink the floor, just having an athlete that can do that with such timely instincts. A great switcher onto bigs as well for a small ball Warriors unit, which they love to opt to as well. So just with everything that Jimmy brings as a scorer on and off the ball, just as a passer, as a defensive guy on and off the ball as well, as a superior athlete still at this time in his career, I have him as the 4th most valuable player out of this over 35 age group. Now, number 3, we're going to move on. And I think a lot of people had like problems with this, just, you know, with who was actually above him. But at number 3, I did have Kevin Durant. So to start the year, the averages look very, very nice considering his age. 25 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, 50, 39, 89 splits, which did round to 55% effective field goal percentage. Obviously, the low volume of threes is why that isn't higher considering how beautiful those natural traditional splits look. But the thing is, he's still an off-ball machine, and that is the luxury that the Rockets are absorbing from KD's arrival in Houston. 93rd percentile spot-up player, scoring the ball at 1.4 points per possession on those possessions. He's a high-level off-screen and handoff creator as well, as far as like metrics go too. And like obviously having Şengün as that predominant screener and roll man, Adams as well, like that does alleviate a lot of the extra space that he can get to get those shots off. But he's scoring the ball really well off the ball. And that is the important thing when we are talking about valuable stuff. And then obviously for the on-ball stuff, like he's been pretty dicey compared to usual years. like we know with KD, like what the story is with him as an on-ball creator and why he can be relatively limited compared to the top guys in the NBA at doing the on-ball type of creation stuff. But like the physicality and the extra attention that KD is getting as the primary ball handler, like we've seen how that's been able to throw him off his base and throw off that power transfer in his jump shot considering his size as well. And like we've seen what those low center of gravity, like point of attack guys can do, like to actually hassle KD, but also just the absence of another high level perimeter ball handler that has geared so much more attention to KD this year in particular. Obviously last year, you think about Phoenix, Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. You know, you think about Brooklyn when they were healthy, Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Obviously in the Warriors, they don't even need to go through that. But he's just receiving probably the most attention that he ever has for a prolonged time as that perimeter ball handling option, as that 1A option. Then that obviously in the metrics as well, that's why it hasn't looked so stellar. He's only 59th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler. And in isolation, he's only scoring the ball at 36th percentile as well. And that also still stems into the post-up possessions too. Now, obviously the absence of external value with just the fall in that on-ball scoring efficiency and just obviously the rim pressure as well hasn't really been ever that valuable for years. That has been like why I think KD's value is a little bit capped and why it can be deceiving looking at the basic production stats that he still continues to bring. The passing as well, like that can wane. I mean, like he's averaging 3 turnovers to 4 assists a game. And those just aren't the numbers that you'd expect for KD. But what I will say is that, you know, I don't think KD does get enough credit for those 4 and 3 assists that he does generate with Şengün making those short roll feeds. And so those like numbers don't tell the entire story, but obviously the physicality from defenders, that has also played into KD's inability to make these bullet reads on those drop-offs, those pockets, those swinging skip passes. And that does deter much of the ball handling value when we are comparing him to the other offensive 1As. Guys like SGA, Jokic, Luka, those guys out in the Western Conference as well that he's bound to run into. But nevertheless, KD is still defying age at this point of his career, like from more of a skill perspective. And his value to Houston has been absolutely immense just with the gravity that he's bringing. Obviously, the efficiency as a ball handler, ball security doesn't look great as the ball handler, but he's bringing immense gravity on those reads. And like when he does make those reads successfully, hitting Şengün in the pocket, like that's when Houston's at their absolute best and why they've been one of the best offenses going around in basketball. And I attribute so much of that to what KD's been able to bring as that presence. But number 2, though, this is where actually I had, I think, a few people a little bit funny with my ranking, but I had LeBron James here at number 2. I think people thought KD should have been at number 2 just with how they've both been playing so far this year, but I don't think it's been a large enough sample size, especially from LeBron's point of view. And for that, I'm going to keep him here at number 2 for now. He's averaged 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 8 assists in just the 6 games that he's played. And he's only shot the ball on traditional splits of 41, 26, 55. And that ran into 46% effective field goal percentage in that first hand, just over like 6 games so far. Like it's not much of a sample size to delve off of, but obviously the production doesn't look amazing. And it's basically the lowest usage rate of his career as well. And I think that's kind of attributed to him fully like delving into that connective role, which is he's going to have to play to thrive in LA. But the thing is, 6 games, like I said, like I'm taking a lot of this as like from what we've seen from last year's form of LeBron. And so in a vacuum, I still have LeBron as the second best player out of this group of guys over 35. If you look at last year, I mean, the guy averaged 24 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists on 57% effective field goal percentage for a physical wing. And just someone that I thought as well should have made All-NBA first team at age 40, just with the level that he rose to in that mid-regular season level, like especially when the Luka trade went down with all the injuries to AD and with Luka having to make that transition as well. He's just one of the most portable players going around right now. And so his value is ultra insane to me still. And like I think LA is going to really milk the best out of him, especially with JJ Redick as that coach. And like they both understand what the Lakers really need. And like obviously the redundancy of LeBron as a ball handler, especially with Reeves playing such exceptional basketball. And you already have Luka as well. So LeBron's really going to delve into the off-ball stuff, which I am really excited to see, even though he's not going to put up the same basic production stats that we've been used to. So with LeBron, he's still one of the premier passers in the NBA. He's a guy that never misses an opening or a connective hockey feed to me. And he's still just obviously all-time great feel for simple advantage creation in this backseated role even. And like you look at the simple drive and kick reads that he's able to continually make for this Lakers team. He's still a freakishly physical athlete who is impossible to stay in front of in the full court when he does hit the gas still. You know, the numbers will rise as well with LeBron as well. Like that's nothing to worry about. And though he may also not have the stellar numbers that we've seen from the past 2 decades, I just think people have to actually look at the impact, the floor, and the ceiling that he's still able to bring, which will be absolutely crucial for LA's chances to even have a sniff of coming out of the Western Conference. And his defensive captaincy as well is the thing that we're going to really scope on, I think, this season. Like even just in the handful of games, like we've seen in patches how vital he has been in that role, just, you know, having to actually captain next to low-equipped front court defensive talent in guys like DeAndre Ayton, Rui Hachimura, Jackson Hayes, just the value of his communication, just the rotation accuracy and speed, just understanding of how to bait the lowest quality shots for opposing teams and understanding where to best expend his energy defensively. That is all what makes him so special. And like you talk about what makes Draymond Green special as a defender, this guy has the potential to reach that level in certain patches on certain nights. And like, you know, you match that with the super physical frame, the mobility, the size that he still brings at the forward position, and you still have a plus defender in some of the most important games. And I think LeBron's value is going to be really on display this year. And I think in terms of the portability, he's one of the most versatile players the game has ever seen. And he's one of the most versatile players in the NBA today. And like we saw that as of last year when he was able to thrive in that on and off ball role on both ends of the floor. It's going to be similar. And I value guys and their versatile abilities to provide value. And that's why I do have LeBron still at number 2 until proven otherwise. But number 1 though, I have Steph Curry, and I don't think this should be any surprise to anyone. He's averaging 28 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists on 47, 39, 92 splits, and that comes to 59% effective field goal percentage at age 37 as a 6'3" point guard. I've harped on it for a few weeks, but he's the GOAT of longevity at the guard position, and it's not close. And in terms of just the scoring efficiency metrics, I'm just going to pull off a few metrics. I hope I don't bore you here, but in the restricted area, 69% of his looks he's making. In the paint non-restricted areas, in that floater touch shot range, 62% as a small guard. That is absolutely insane. He's making 68% of his layups. Again, freakish for his size. 59% effective field goal percentage on all pull-up jump shots. That is insane still at his age. And 41% of all of his pull-up threes are cash. This guy's absolutely freakishly valuable to Golden State still and their offensive system. And his ability to offer intentional gravity to every piece of off-ball movement that he provides is why he does rank here and why I still actually view him as the top 5 player in the league, especially while Jason Tatum sits out for this season. And he may be, like, he's probably still the most impactful screener and cutter in basketball over Nikola Jokic. And he's just in super aggressive form right now. And just for the fact that Steph is still a top 5 scorer in basketball, in my opinion, and also that he is a top 3 most valuable offensive weapon in basketball still, which is just the aggregate efficiency and the extra value that you can absorb from his movement gravity. I just think he's pretty clearly the best player in the NBA over 35 years old. And that opinion, I don't think will change at all this season. And just in the super conditioned, super aggressive form that he's in, I'm really excited to see what Steph Curry will be able to do when he can see consistent time on the floor when we do get past this hellish regular season like schedule that teams are thrusted upon. Like, it's about 82 games. Like, you're asking a team like the Warriors, who are built around like 4 guys, 35 plus, Al Horford, Jimmy, Steph, Draymond, like, it's a pretty tough ask. So I'm just, with this Warriors team, I'm going to wait till like that March, April range to really rank them and really take them fully seriously. But Steph Curry, I have no doubt, if he can get to that point in time, that point in the schedule at a healthy, like stable point, I reckon the Warriors will be absolutely safe with their 1A offensive option. And so with that, those were my 10 best basketball players in the NBA right now over 35. And so we're just seeing the allowance for longevity just really skyrocket, obviously, in the past few years, with just how ultra competitive these guys are and how they've been able to mold their skill sets to really offer value this late into their careers. It was fun to list and review and appreciate these guys, and just, it was fun to look at just how much these guys are giving us into their late careers at this point in time. So if you did enjoy this episode though, make sure to follow the podcast and check out my Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Casual NBA Fanatic for more weekly breakdowns, daily reels, and deep dives. I appreciate you guys for listening, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.